Jacksonville. The child was born but couldn't sit still. 86 years later with no regret. You know that man can't sit still yet. The Great Depression couldn't get him down. He worked for his dad's store in town, collecting money in small amounts for poor whites and blacks and their furniture accounts. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. As he'd collect, he'd talk to folks. He'd hear legends, tales, songs, and jokes. Now this fine treasure he'd record and write. He was colorblind, didn't see black and white. Writer's project for the WPA. Zora Neale Hurston, he earned his pay. Crackers and blacks, they talked for hours. It was a barefoot history in this land of flowers.
The Week That Was, from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. The program date is the 8th of June, 2019. At Boston Red here in the Jerry Pippin Memorial Broadcast Booth. An interesting program today. We'll talk about fake news from the standpoint of the legendary CBS News person, Edward R. Murrow. We'll start with the Supreme Court and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She is 86 years old, and her thoughts on the various divisions. We have Uncle Carl Robe here, and he is writing as usual from the Wall Street Journal. We normally feature him on this program. I believe he's talking about Joe Biden this time around. And we have the St. Louis Blues winning the latest game in Boston over the Bruins, and that series moves on. And we'll talk a little bit about it. The College World Series, the women's series, also is moving along, so we have a lot of sport out here, and of course the baseball scores. Let's get to the Supreme Court. This is from the Washington Post. Justice Ginsburg says deep divisions on the way, and the Supreme Court watchers look for clues. Well, the divisions within the American society, and those divisions are based upon basically the pivotal book by Nate Silver, The Signal and the Noise. A lot of noise out there. A lot of people divided up on all kinds of issues. Some of them major issues, some of them minor issues. Very difficult to determine that. But elections do determine various things, and the Supreme Court is not an exception. Now, Justice Ginsburg turns reporter, and reporters and lawyers start to search for clues. In a purportedly just facts speech, she made this to the Conference of the U.S. Court of Appeals, the 2nd District in New York, and we'll get to that in a minute. She, tends to prevailing decisions teased in the court about whether the consensus may contain the census may contain a question on citizenship. The court would be for the first time to decide that a state electoral map are so influenced by partisan gerrymandering that they violate the voters' constitutional rights. Be prepared for sharp disagreements as the court finishes work this month, and they'll go on their summer recess. So far, only a quarter of the court's decisions have been closely divided, she noted, Given the number of the most watched cases still unannounced, I can't predict that the relatively low sharp division ratio will hold. When the court sets to finish its work the last week of June, the justices by now know the outcomes and are watching and delivering opinions. The next batch will come on Monday. Ginsburg didn't give anything away, but she offered what she could be interpreted as clues on her own thinking on the citizenship question. For instance, she laid out the facts of what she called a case of huge importance. The Trump administration wants to ask everyone who receives the census form whether or not they are a citizen. Something that hasn't been done since 1950, so there is some basis for this. Make America Great Again, I suppose. Or Wilbur Ross has said the information would be useful in protecting minority rights. Well, that is a flippable, what political consultants call a flippable into the body politic. Challenges some states and civil rights groups said it would result in an undercount because the respondents would fear reporting non-citizenship in their households. The motivation of enforcing voter rights is a pretext. They say the Department of Justice has never before asked for such information. Ginsburg noted, as census experts agree about the undercount, and the three-judge court, the lower court three judges have said the question cannot be added. She then noted legal similarities to the case from the last term in which she was a dissenter. Speculation about the outcomes in the census case noted last year as Trump versus Hawaii. The court upheld so-called travel ban in an opinion granting a greater deference to the executive. Respondents in the census case have argued that a ruling in Secretary Ross's favor would stretch deference before the breaking point. Well, this happens in extreme situations. She also mentioned that partisan gerrymandering case, very high on the most watched list. One involves a congressional district drawn by Republican leadership in North Carolina, the other in the Democrats in Maryland. The 86-year-old justice noted that other facts about the court, with Justice Kavanaugh hiring all-female staff of 4 clerks, and she said the court, for the first time in history, has more women than men clerking. But that has been a trend in the legal profession as far as the number of women entering the legal profession. Women did not fare nearly as well as advocates, she said. Only 21% of the attorneys presenting oral arguments of this term were female. Of the 34 attorneys who appeared more than once before the court, only 6 were women. So this is the old comparison of appointing a person of color, an African-American Latino, as the head or the vice head of a major corporation when they were the only ones working there. And this is an old trick there. You put a lot of female clerks in there, the clerical types, but at the same time you have very few females actually arguing cases where the action is, because people track such things. Ginsburg told Justice Breyer spoke more than any other justice during oral arguments. The Justice Sotomayor asked the first question more than anyone else. Justice Ginsburg told her audience that the most important thing that has happened to the court since her address to them last year was the resignation of one Anthony Kennedy, who for years had been the most influential member of the court. His retirement was, and I say, the event of greatest consequences for the current term, and perhaps for many terms to go. And this is one of the situations in division, and this is, and I'll impinge this on Rubaida Ginsburg, Associate Justice of the Supreme Court, remarks for the Second Circuit Judicial Conference on the 7th of June. This is the highlight. Shortly after the meeting a year ago, Justice Kennedy announced his retirement. It was, I say, the event of greatest consequences. The first arguments of the 2019 term. The court set with only 8 justices. We fully regained the strength for the second week immediately after Kavanaugh's confirmation. Justice Kavanaugh arrived. Justice Gorsuch cheerfully relinquished to our newest colleague the task assigned to the junior justice, answering the phone the rare time it rings during a conference and opening the door when an aide appears to be delivering a paper. A justice left behind, conveying to the entourage from the clerk's office, the public information office, and other court administrators. The depositions reaches a conference in the most thankless of all chores, sitting on the court's cafeteria committee. Justice Breyer retained his title this term as the justice who spoke the most words during oral arguments. Justice Sotomayor ranked a close second. She also asked the first question more often than any other justice, 84 times. Justice Thomas, who ordinarily asks no questions because he thinks excuse me, the rest of us ask too many, broke his silence for the first time since 2016, asking 3 questions in a single argument. That was Flowers versus Mississippi, a case rising the Batman challenge to a prosecution, the Batson, to a prosecutor's jury selection practices. Justice Kavanaugh has made history by bringing on board, all-female clerk crew. Thanks to selection, the court this term has for the first time more women than men serving as law clerks. Women did not fare as well. Only 21% of the attorneys presenting oral arguments. Some 6,000 petitions have been for review have been filed so far this term. We heard arguments in just 70 hour words. Added to that number, add 5 summary per curiam decisions, opinions rendered without full briefs or oral arguments. That brings to a total of 75 already rendered, plus the remaining to be released before the court goes on recess. As of today, we have announced 43 decisions in argued cases. That leaves a large number of 27 to be announced in the remaining days of June. Of the cases resolved so far, only 11, or just 25%, were decided by the infamous, my words, infamous 5-4 or 5-3, given the number of most watched cases still unannounced. I can't predict that, cannot predict that the relative low sharp division ratio will hold. The 70 cases fully briefed and 12 in argued. 12 cases, or 17% of our argued case docket, came to us from the Ninth Circuit. The Sixth Circuit was a distant second. The Ninth Circuit sits in San Francisco, accounting for the 7th argued case. Of the 5 cases that came to us from the 2nd District, we have so far released only 1 deposition. That is the case of the Republic of Sudan versus Harrison, involved in an attempt to serve process on Sudan by sailors injured in a terrorist bombing of the USS Cole, if you remember that event. The Foreign Service Immunity Act requires the summons, complaint, or notice to be sued, addressed, and dispatched by the clerk of court to the head of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the foreign state concerned. The question presented: does it suffice to dispatch a service document to a foreign minister by mailing them to the foreign state's diplomatic mission in Washington? The 2nd Circuit said yes, but the 4th Circuit said no. In line with Solicitor General's arguments, we held 8-1 that a packet is not addressed and dispatched to a country's foreign minister when it's mailed to an embassy rather than the foreign ministry itself. The first of four are yet to be announced. The second district's Gundy versus U.S. Gundy was convicted of violating a Sex Offender Registration and Notification Act, which generally requires sex offenders to register where they reside. The act vests authority in the Attorney General to specify whether how the SARNA registration requirements will apply to persons like Gundy, who committed qualifying offenses in 2006. Enactment, Congress, Gurney argued, has impermissibly delegated the authority to the Attorney General to make a full, fundamentally legal decision. The District Court, in turn, the Second District, rejected his attempts to revitalize the non-delegate doctrine, which the court has, last invoked to hold the legislation on Constitution 1935. And I'm not going to go much further here. The amendment constraint at issue in the Manhattan Community Access Corporation versus Halleck, New York law channels where issuing a franchise to an operator of more than 30 channels. New York City assigned a management of public access channel for the borough of Manhattan to a private non-profit, a corporation in the Manhattan Neighborhood Network. Halleck and Lindoza initiated legislation, produced content for the channel. When Halleck and Mendoza made and broadcast a video critical of the authority, the MNN, they were banned from the channel. They sued that the MNN violated their First Amendment rights. And the answer to that, we're not a state actor, therefore the First Amendment. And this is one thing to remember in jurisprudence, or in American law, I should say, that the First Amendment does not apply to our conduct. The district court agreed and dismissed the suit. The Court of Appeals reversed it 2-1. And as you know, state action doctrine is not crystal clear. Area law, it has its ups and has its downs, and you run into this sometimes. The Second Circuit case appeared on the April calendar as the most crowded setting of the term. We are trying to front load with a heavy calendar in October and a lighter one in April. And let me finish this up here. We'll append this where you can look into all these cases, but this is just a factual situation she's giving here. On the procedural front, we have followed the lead of the Federal Rule of Appellate Procedure, effective June 1. The word limited for the parties' main brief has been cut from 15,000 words to 13,000. Reply briefs formally due no fewer than 7 days before the argument will now be due fewer than 10 days. And that's it. Anyway, we will append that. We got off into his story just to give you a little idea of what Justice Ginsburg was talking about. Now let's go to the body here. It took a little time to do that. This is kind of an interesting situation here. We'll just dispose of it very quickly. An attorney in Florida, Miami, Florida, name was pulled from the Alabama Law School, and his $21.5 million gift returned. A week after Carl Gables is where he worked, the philanthropist there, Hugh Coberhausen Jr. called for students to boycott the University of Alabama over the passage of a law banning nearly all abortions in the state. The University Board of Trustees voted on Saturday to give his money back. That's a $21.5 million gift. Coberhouse, the top donor at the university and former Miami prosecutor, said that the board's decision was a retaliation for his exercising free speech. He's correct, and accused the university of lying to the public. The university added Coberhouse ongoing attempts to interfere in the operation of the law school and led to a unanimous vote to return his money. Koberhaus said the issue he had with the law school about decreasing enrollment numbers has been resolved before he called for the boycott. And law schools around the country hit by that issued a call, Koberhaus did, for a boycott of the state's economy following the passage of the law. Koberhaus did not attend the University of Alabama. His parents did. The university's business school, of course, is named after his father. And his father was the original owner of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Let me finish this article up here. And he also wrote an opinion in the Washington Post. I don't have it here, but this is Mr. Koberhaus, Hugh Koberhaus, and the history of the University of Alabama. We move on. And I'm not sure. Let me see what we have here. This is a draft of articles of impeachment against one DJ Trump, and this was an opinion piece published in the New York Times by our Phil. And what he outlines here calls for DJ Trump's impeachment are getting louder since the release of the Mueller report. If the Democrats move to impeach Trump, the articles of impeachment drafted past presidents will probably guide them. The Constitution, high crimes, misdemeanors, we've talked about this before. And we might, what might impeach articles against Trump look like? They go back to the impeachment articles against Tricky Dick. It's based on the Nixon impeachment in 1974, July. The House Judiciary approved 3 articles of impeachment against Tricky Dicky. The resignation before the full House. He resigned before the full House could vote. Trump's behavior maps merely one onto the first and the third Tricky Dicky articles there, and what the articles were. The introduction in the first impeachment article against Tricky Dick set up the main argument Congress would likely use against DJ. The president attempted to impede a federal investigation into his actions and those of his associates. Like DJ Trump, Nixon never submitted questions to the FBI investigators. Nixon misrepresented and lied about his involvement in the Watergate cover-up. A little bit different there. Most of the above charges against Tricky Dick required only a modest tweaks to match Trump. This is kind of interesting, his approach here. Trump's misconduct focuses on covering up actions by members of his campaign ribbon committee to re-elect, the creep as they call it. An impeachment article against DJ could argue the president encouraged witnesses to give false and misleading testimony. And based on Clinton's impeachment, the first article of impeachment passed by the Republican-controlled House against Wild Bill Clinton were based on testimony he gave before a federal grand jury, because Trump has refused an in-person interview with Mueller and did not agree to provide written answers to questions about obstruction, and has never testified before a grand jury. Little of this first article is relevant to DJ Trump. But in any case, impeaching DJ would likely rest on obstruction of justice, the focus of Clinton's third article. Republicans also drafted a second and fourth impeachment article against Clinton, but neither passed the House. And then he goes on to lay out the articles. There are 3 articles here of impeachment against DJ Trump. His conduct while President of the United States. Sorry about that. That's William Jefferson Clinton. And this is also William Jefferson Clinton. This is the Russian government, the Article 1, engaged in a sophisticated campaign to influence the 2016 election. DJ Trump, using the power of his high office, engaged personally and through his close associates and agents a course of conduct are planned and designed to delay, impede, and obstruct the investigation of such a context with Russia. This means he used to impede the course of justice or plan inclusion one of the following, and I won't get into this is very fine print here, using the power of the office of President of the United States, D.J. Trump, in a violation of the Constitution, the oath faithfully to execute the office of President of the United States and to the best of his ability, engaged in conduct impeding the due and proper administration of justice and the course of lawful inquiry and contriving of the laws governing agencies or the executive's branch of government. In very fine print here. And lastly, Article 3 in the conduct of Office of the President, D.J. Trump, contrary to his oath to faithfully execute the laws, etc. On April the 16th, 2019, and April 22nd, 2016, and May 21st, 2019, the Committee on Oversight and Reform of the House of Representatives, that would have been on the 18th of May of this year, and the Committee on Financial Services, that's where Maxine Waters is, willfully disobeyed such subpoenas. The subpoenaed papers and things were deemed necessary by the committee. In all of this, D.J. Trump has added in a manner contrary to the trust as president and subversion of the constitutional government to the great prejudice of the cause of justice and law and justice, and to the malfeasance injury of people of the United States. Therefore, D.J. Trump, such a conduct warrants the impeachment and removal from office. We'll have to append this one on, and let's move on here. We need to find Uncle Carl Robe. Let's see, ESPN. Where's Uncle Carl? Oops. He's somewhere. Incidentally, the Trump machinations on Mexico, a deal has been reached on the tariffs. The Mexican government is working, this is a 5% tariffs on their border. They are turning people back. I think that's in Chiapas is where that is going on. U.S. hiring slowed sharply as a Trump trade war starts to bite. And this is not with Mexico. They only created 7,500 jobs. That could be revised up as a significant pullback from the 224,000 added in April. But again, this is a very weak situation. Uncle Carl has slipped away from us here. Incidentally, in the Noor case, the murder of Justine Ruchak Damon, he was sentenced, this is Noor, to 12.5 years. Not enough, but it does send a message to various other actors on the scene. And we don't want to get into that Madonna story. Here we go, Uncle Carl. He's writing in the Wall Street Journal as normally he does on June 6, 2019. Everyone attacking Joe Biden. The political phenomena of political phony war has ended, and the real shooting has begun. The Democratic candidates are fighting on two fronts. On the more important front, the VP Biden is taking heavy fire. He sets atop the field with a 34.9%. That's in the real clear average there. And aiming to pull him down, as that second-tier candidates launched their attacks at the California Democratic Party convention. Bernie Sanders polling second with 16.9. That's an average there. Implicitly assaulted Biden by criticizing his middle ground of politics. He said Democrats will not defeat DJ Trump unless we bring excitement and energy, which is only possible with a new and progressive agenda. Elizabeth Warren, who's in third place, 8.4, wouldn't play to join the offensive, attacking Biden's bipartisan instincts. The time for small ideas is over, she said, rejecting his incremental policies that marks there. And Alfred B. Newman, known as Pete Buttigieg, out of South Bend, who polled started to make a generational contest with the 76-year-old Biden. That doesn't matter. Uncle Carl just threw that in to have some criticism. These critics revered up supporters in their in the hall. Didn't dent Biden. A traditional liberal was elected state, and I mean, we pointed this out. Democratic chair, hardly one of the Sandernesers, as he called them, and former steward of Barbara Boxer, used to be a senator in California, endorsed Biden. Well, you can expect that. Candidates such as Buttigieg, Kamala Harris beat O'Rourke. 3.9 is the average. He likes to point that out. And Booker are more likely to improve their standings by attacking Biden. It's only a matter of time before the Democratic presidential candidates open fire on Biden. He has launched so far a gap-free launch, and he has stayed atop the polls since entering the race. Team of Biden clearly understands this is coming, and at American Institute's Global Conference at the end of April, the Center for American Progress, and so forth, and nearer tandem declared that any Democratic candidate who attacks another would pay a big price with ordinary Democrats, to which the proper response is baloney. Establishment Democrats may hope, but no candidate is untouchable. How Biden parries these assaults will be the next big test if he goes into August a bloodbath, but on Biden returns the campaign focus to his strengths. He is a steady, reliable choice who matches up best against DJ Trump. My words, not Uncle Carl's. Biden will have brought time to deepen his organization before the opening contest in Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, and South Carolina. Last week, some 16 Democratic presidential candidates, polling 1% or less, called him an aspirant, grabbing attention by opening a second front with sharp attacks on Biden. Two candidates attempted to move up in polling by bashing their party's nutty fringe at the convention. That was Hickenlooper, used to be the governor of Colorado, declared socialism is not the answer, and warned Democrats would hand this election to DJ Trump if they offered the socialist agenda that removed private insurance from 150 million Americans. You can see Uncle Carl lapped that up and tackled the climate change by guaranteeing every American a job. Some delegates responded by largely jeering him. Well, yeah, he's not going anywhere. Let's get to Edward R. Murrow here. We wanted to bring this up. Fake news battle revealed in a World War II memos. It was October 1940. Europe was overrun by Nazis, as it is today. Britain stood alone against relentless German bombing campaigns, reporting it over the radio waves to the American public from his office. Across from the BBC was legendary correspondent of CBS, Edward R. Murrow. Murrow's broadcasts were from the BBC studios. At the start of the war, America was officially neutral, As CBS contributor Simon Bates explains, Merle broadcasts were believed to play a large part in shifting of public opinion in favor of joining the conflict in support of Britain. There was a sizable isolationist movement in the country that accused Merle and others of acting as tools of the British government and not telling Americans the whole story. You might call it a very early accusation of fake news. In 1939, Merle explained the rules under which he operated into a series of wartime memos recently unearthed by the BBC. We're not permitted to divulge military information calculated to be of value to a possible enemy, he wrote. Within the limits, we are to have a freedom of expression. There are certain matters of a military nature which are not permitted to be discussed. The attacks on the integrity from the home irritated Merle, and in 1940, Roger Eckersley, the head of the BBC's American liaison section, wrote a memo to his bosses in bold, a proposition from CBS News correspondent. Merle tells me that there's a large body of opinion amongst American listeners that there's still lots of unnecessary censorship in regard to the news, and that they never know whether they are really hearing the truth or not. He went on to offset this once and for all, and has pulled up the suggestion to me during the completely uncensored talk that he would not broadcast if a line was altered. In my opinion, there's something in it. It makes the American people realize censorship here doesn't really is done on really reasonable grounds, wrote Eckersley. The idea certainly came as a shock to the censors at the British Information, which stopped the proposal broadcast. Merle broadcast. Merle was furious, saying the bureaucratic memo informed him a decision would occupy a privileged position in my file of documents reflecting the prostitution of the American language in the service of compromise and obscenity. It's really a classic here. And he wrote back to Eckersley, was tickled to death by your letter of the 3rd of October. Yes, do keep the note. It's the most valuable contribution of any history which is written 100 years hence. Merle's proposal to broadcast uncensored reports was never raised again. A year later, 1941, he was about to sail for a break in America when he wrote a warm letter to his friends. This is written from Bristol. Ain't seen a censor since I got in. Propose accolade which, if carried to sufficient length, would reel of posthumous high-mindedness, and is merely to say that I have occasionally cursed you and invariably enjoyed working with you. Night after night, Merle drove the streets of London at a great and personal risk of the German bombs. His friends called him the Iron Man of the Blitz, relying on a mixture of adrenaline, black coffee, and cigarettes. He was a smoker, and we'll end this. Bates noted that Merle never did a broadcast of an uncensored talk from his post in London. Perhaps didn't need to. But we'd bring that out there. We don't have news types like Edward R. Merle. They are gone from the scene. Quickly do some of the sporting scores here. The Raptors 105-92 over the Warriors, and they now lead the series of 3-1. I was talking about it with a basketball fan there. And in the ICC Cricket World Cup, we're coming up today, England and Bangladesh. Thought we'd get cricket here sooner or later. And in the FIFA Women's World Cup, we have Germany, China, Spain, and South Africa, and Norway and Nigeria. All these nations are football hungry. And in the regionals, we have here, this is Louisville, 14-1 over East Carolina. Texas Tech 8-6 over Oklahoma State. And that was Lubbock regional, and Michigan 3-2 over UCLA. That was out in Los Angeles. Oops. And Duke and Vanderbilt. Duke was 18-5 there in the Nashville regionals there. So we look here. Let's do the baseball scores. Nonetheless, the Cubbies 3-1 over the Cards. This is in Wrigley Field. And the Phillies are 4-2 over the Reds in Philadelphia. The D-backs were in Toronto, 8-2 D-backs over the Blue Jays. The Rockies were in New York. Rockies 5-1 over the Mets. The Twins win in Detroit, 6-3. Cleveland 5-2 over the Yankees in Cleveland. The Rays beat our Sox 5-1 in Fenway. Atlanta won in Florida, 7-1 over the Marlins. And the Athletics over the Rangers 5-3, and in 11, the Astros took it 4-3 over the Orioles in Houston. The Brewers had a very strong night, 10-4 over the Pirates in Milwaukee. The Royals won in Kansas City 6-4. The Mariners 6-2 in Los Angeles over the Angels, and the Nationals down in San Diego 5-4. And finally, the Giants win 1 over the Dodgers. Sorry, I missed that game 2-1. The line score there. Giants has 7 runs and no hits, and Dodgers 6 runs there. Mr. Kershaw actually lost the game. You don't see that happen very much. And so, as they say, get ready for hockey in the Stanley Cup. Controversial play push the Bruins to the break. The Blues head back to St. Louis with 3-2, but Game 5 includes yet another officiating controversy. And let's take a quick look at it as we wind down here. With a 2-1 win in Game 5, the lowest scoring game of the series, St. Louis Blues are on the curse of their first ever Stanley Cup, and have a chance to win it at home. They are the Boston Bruins. They have to summon some composure there. Is what they said. So Game 5 was last night. The Blues are 2-1 over the Bruins. Where do we begin? The Blues, the Bruins captain Zito Chara making the decision to suit up less than 72 hours after reportedly breaking his jaw. Oh boy. And Boston suiting up several defensemen because they knew Chara wasn't 100% no doubt with a broken jaw. And the goaltender Jordan Bennington towards us in his finest performance. What the Blues on the Periscope of their first Stanley Cups. Let's see some of the trappings. Let me get back to this. Some of the trapping calls. Oh, this is here anyway. This is more into hockey. The Bruins coach Bruce Cassidy went into a fizzy, suggesting a conspiracy that Craig Beruneby, a comment after Game 3. I'm not certain about that situation, but we'll see. Precipice. Okay. I always want to know. Anyway, these are the stars of the Brewers. Really, there, the Brewers, and Jason Bennington. This is the Blues, and Zito Chara. Bruins. So he suited up. This is a fellow with the broken jaw. And speaking of broken jaw, this will do it for us. We'll see you on of the Monday Morning Quarterback on our political side, Boston Red. On the economic side, Numbers Man, we'll see you with this week in economics. And we also report that we finished and had to redo on the trial, the sentencing of Muhammad Noor in the Midwest city of Minneapolis, sending a message of 2.5 years there for him. And he's back at home in secure prison. Good day.